The portrayal of characters with autism spectrum disorder in television and movies are often done so in a negative light. Most of the times they're depicted as flat, one-dimensional characters who are solely defined by their autism and hardly explore their life outside of the condition. The television show Abbott Elementary, however, has me particularly excited about Tyler James Williams' character, Gregory Eddie.
Oh, you're the sub. Forgive me, I thought one of my colleagues here hired a stripper for me.
Okay.
Although it hasn't been confirmed whether or not Gregory has autism, he is an autistic coded character, and seeing the portrayal of these traits in a positive light is not only refreshing, but beneficial for normalizing the experiences of individuals with autism. So, what makes me think Mr. Eddie's autistic? Now, quick disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, but here are a couple things I observed. For starters, he exhibits certain traits commonly seen in individuals with ASD, such as hypersystemizing.
Hey. Oh. What is this?
I mapped out the entire school year so I can meet every one of the district's mandated goals. I scheduled everything down to the hour. Now, I didn't allot for this conversation, so if we could wrap this up in the next 2 minutes, that'd be very helpful.
Systemizing is the drive to analyze or construct systems, and according to Baron Cohen's research, the systemizing mechanism is set too high in autistic people. As a result, there's a tendency within this group to create highly lawful systems and resist systems of high variance or change. This would explain why Gregory decided to plan the entire school year and then become despondent when he realized he couldn't.
Everything is chaos, and we all lose.
I really like how the show decided to approach the storyline and how they approach all the storylines involving Gregory's autistic traits. Although they're sometimes played up for comedic effect, which is expected on a comedy show, he's always met with understanding and support. At the end of the day, Miss Howard comes to him, and she's there to comfort and encourage him, like she would with any other friend. The show isn't treating him differently, nor do they make autism his identity. It's not a constant struggle, and he's able to accommodate himself without dramatization. Being direct or blunt is a common spectrum trait. Autistic people can find implications and assumptions hard to interpret, and therefore often speak much more directly than allistic people may.
Now, a quick definition for those unfamiliar with the term allistic, and it's a good term to use to help distinguish people from their autistic peers without using judgmental terms like normal in contrast to autistic.
Anyway, take this scene as an example.
Come on, teach us something.
Oh, all right. Farmer Hank has 7 turkeys. Then he buys 6 more. How many turkeys does Farmer Hank now have?
Is one of the turkeys pregnant?
One of my kids asked the same thing.
Because it's a good question, and it shows that they're using critical thinking.
It's irrelevant.
No, it might be silly to you, but to them it might be an important question that if they don't get it answered, they can't focus.
And diversions are an important part of learning. Otherwise, they're just memorizing.
Memorization is how I learned all the state's capitals. Juneau, Salem, Madison. I can keep going.
Now, I perceive Barbara and Melissa as allistic, and they're clearly confused by Gregory's teaching here. His straightforward approach is off-putting for them. For many autistic people, honesty and kindness are one and the same, whereas allistic people like Melissa and Barbara, they can sometimes interpret things like honesty as rude or boring. Another major difference I see between Barbara and Melissa when contrasted with Gregory has to do with nonverbal communication. Allistic people rely heavily on nonverbal cues, including facial expressions, body position, and gestures, such as Barbara's dancing. Autistic people, however, may miss or misinterpret this unspoken information completely. Gregory can't seem to wrap his head around what body language has to do with his teaching. He can't understand why dancing is relevant to teaching. And despite these misunderstandings, I really appreciate that Gregory's differences are not the butts of the character's jokes. He is loved and always supported by the other characters. There's always someone there to help when they notice he's struggling, and the characters themselves assist with respect and care. He's not being mocked or abused for being different. Additionally, individuals with autism display less variability in their facial expressions compared to their allistic counterpart. This reduced expressiveness can make it challenging for others to interpret their emotions accurately.
Wow.
Right? Or no, I can't tell by your reaction.
And I also suspect that Gregory's aversion to certain foods indicates the possibility of him being on the spectrum.
Greg?
Oh, I mean, it's all gonna be trash to me. I'm a Baltimore pizza guy, like I said.
You know what?
I thought that might happen. And so, as your best friend here at Abbott, I took it upon myself to drive 2 hours to Baltimore to get you your favorite pizza from Say Cheese.
That's crazy.
I even asked the pizzaiolo to make it extra crunchy and wet. Bon appetit.
All right, man, I can't do this. I just don't like pizza.
What? Say that again. I don't think I heard you, son.
Sweetheart, what do you mean you don't like pizza?
I just don't understand the concept of having a bunch of ingredients just slosh around in your mouth. It's not just pizza. I've got like 4 or 5 things that I actually like, and I just stick to those.
Do you like pie?
Fruit should not be hot.
Okay.
Autism often comes with hypersensitivity to textures. According to a study linked below about food selectivity and sensory sensitivity in autism, children with autism are often highly selective eaters with very restricted repertoires of food acceptance that may be limited to as few as 5 foods. And this doesn't change much when they become adults, unless an effort is made. So, from the few examples I observed, I believe it's safe to say that Gregory is at the very least autistic coded, with his blunt statements, blank expressions, aversions to certain foods, and meticulous planning. And as stated before, his portrayal is done right. The fact that Gregory's plotline doesn't revolve around any potential diagnosis is beneficial for people with autism to see, as it's an example of not needing to disclose a disability. I believe this should be a personal call, and there shouldn't be a societal pressure that obligates someone into doing this. With that being said, I can't help but feel a bit torn that the word autism hasn't even been mentioned once in the series, considering that they're school. Since the portrayal is done so right, it almost feels like a crime that they're not officially diagnosing him as autistic. Since there is a limited number of examples in the media of what autism looks like, the media marginalizes autistic people who do not fit those often stereotyped portrayals. Furthermore, when autistic characters are depicted without acknowledging their autism, it can unintentionally perpetuate shame and put pressure on autistic individuals to hide their true selves in order to fit in. After all, it is possible for a character to identify as having autism without that diagnosis being central to their role. I feel like it'd be great to see an episode where Gregory discovers his autism through a late diagnosis. Maybe there could be an episode where a psychologist visits and diagnoses one of his students, and being the great teacher that he is, he does some research to try to accommodate them and inadvertently discovers that he shares an awful amount of symptoms, prompting him to get tested himself. However way the writers decide to write it, I think his diagnosis on the show will be imminent, considering the buildup. And I think it'll be a good thing, as long as the focus isn't dragged. By giving it a label and demonstrating Gregory's ability to interact with others, maintain employment, and form genuine connections with children, his character will help combat the stereotypical representations that exist in society. It will help show that being on the spectrum means that the spectrum is wide and complex and not like the assumptions most people have. Anyway, in conclusion, I'm pretty confident Gregory's autistic, and I'm sorry if that's controversial to say. I am open to hearing opposing opinions. I think somebody had told me once that they think it's just a result of his childhood, but I feel like the symptoms are very specific to autism. So I think the show is leaning in that direction. To close this off, I will acknowledge that Abbott Elementary isn't perfect, but it can serve as a good standing point for positive representation of autism on screen. This can potentially encourage other writers to develop characters with autism who showcase valuable qualities beyond their diagnosis.